so here's the thing. We are designed for survival.
Yeah.
And so it's like the whole theory, like you can't bite off your own finger. Right. And so sometimes you need, you can try, but you're going to step in and protect yourself from that. You know what I mean? So like for you to find the issues that you intentionally buried because they were painful, it's hard to do. It can be done. But when you have someone else going, hey, I can see this because I'm looking at it from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. Listen, and then I have the tools where I can muscle test because we're all energetically connected. And so we're bypassing the conscious mind and tapping into the subconscious. It's literally like hooking up a diagnostic tool to your engine of your vehicle.
But yeah, it's just interesting that, as we talk about those things, because I think a lot of times people are looking for an easier way to get that dopamine hit rather than just, whatever they need to do to get to the spot they're, trying to achieve, or whatever you want to call it, success for them. Mm-hmm. But understanding that journey is not always going to be comfortable. And I guess let's talk about this. So like when a lot of times I feel like as I'm on my way to doing something that I have a goal or I want to achieve, I'm okay with it being uncomfortable. I'm okay with, maybe there's pain in a hike or pain lifting weights or, uncomfortable situations in sales, prospecting, all of these things that I understand. It's just like, hey, it's just a means to an end. So yeah, I might be uncomfortable, but I know that I get this reward from it and I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. Is that, so as you talk a lot about, however you put it, balance or harmony, how do you feel about that? Is it okay to go through those uncomfortable situations to get to this place you're supposed to be? Or do you think it's supposed to be comfortable or is supposed to be harmonious the whole way?
No, I think both are, I don't think there's a wrong way to do it. Okay. I think that, that through the challenging way, there's always lessons. There's always growth. Everything serves a purpose. And so, and really it's not like you're born and like, okay, here's your type. We're only going to raise you to only have your strengths, you know, like you have to fit into society. You've got to be able to fit into the workplace that maybe isn't aligned with your sole purpose. Yeah. You know what I mean? So learning those skills are useful. Yeah. So I just think that it is when you're searching for more, like you guys have always done, where it's like, I can do the discipline. I can do, the hard work, the grind. Mm-hmm. There's benefits to that. Yeah. And then you can also, but I think a huge benefit to living alignment too is, and as opposed to the grind, is you have that contrast to say, I notice the difference and I can do the grind. But this gives me more energy, more renewable, energy, sustainable energy to do more, to give more. And that is contagious. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Go ahead. I was just going to say, to me, I think as we work together, a lot of times it was, if I just change my perspective about, rather than it having to be a grind, I can find things that are in alignment with my beliefs in that process. So rather than like fighting this thing, like I've got to be in control or whatever, realizing I'm not in control, but I can do the things that matter. God's in control of the result, and I'm just in control of what I do today. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like is rather than it feeling like a grind, it was just like, hey, I get to do this stuff today. And so it was really just a change of the perspective, and the result was probably very similar, but in the process, the way I felt en route to that victory or whatever that thing is I was trying to achieve sure felt a lot better. Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, and Brandon and I have talked about this a lot over the years of like, cause it's like, how do you make things happen without doing anything? You know what I mean? Like you live in a life of alignment. How do I flow down the river and make stuff happen at the same time? You know what I mean? How am I in flow? But it's more, and it's not a lack of effort, so it's not like grinding is effort. And if you're not, and you're in alignment, you don't have to do anything. It's a difference between, maybe effort and resistance and divine, alignment and action. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you're still putting in effort. It's just more efficient. And you've got more of it, and it just feels more expansive, and it's less draining physically and all those things.
There is
still have
something,
action.
something to let go and let God, right? We've heard that before.
Yeah.
And it's
and it's not letting go of the effort. It's just letting go of the control, which is just really a change of perspective. And I keep going back to that because I feel like
100%.
That's what, for me it helped, but I know for a lot of people, we talk about this victim mentality. The difference between being a victim or a victor is simply a perspective.
Totally.
And this is why you can find anybody from any walk of life, any country they were born in, and you can find somebody successful in whatever area of life you wanted to measure it by.
Yeah.
And there's going to be also somebody who had that exact same upbringing, childhood situation that was also a failure. And the only thing that changed between those two people was their perspective.
Yeah, what Lexi say last night, she said, I love the saying of, if life was fair, you'd have a lot less than you have.
Yeah.
And that's perspective. That's a great perspective. If you want, if you're in America, if you want life to be fair, if you say life's not fair, well, if life was fair, you'd have a lot less than you have now.
That's like socialism.
Yeah.
Because I actually have a post like that saying, wanting more for doing less is a social and economic disaster.
Yeah.
And I tell Rome right now, because he's at this age, he really understands it. I said, look, the world doesn't owe you anything, and you need to work like that. Every day you work towards something. You need to work like the world doesn't owe you anything. So if you do that, you're taking control of your personal effort. And if you do that and you're not expecting anything owed to you because I did this and then you don't get it, then you feel like crap. But I think, like watching him starting wrestling right now, it's so much fun because, he's putting in a lot of effort and it's hard and these kids are really good and he's getting beat up every day. But his coach keeps telling him, if you win every time, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And so because of his perspective of like, hey, it's okay to lose, but his coach doesn't allow him to lose every time, because then if you're losing every time, you're doing something wrong, right? You should have some you should have some
fun in that.
wins in there. But the point is that he tries to get across to these boys is you got to show up and just get better and give it your all, and then the result will show up in the progress.
And I think the balance in that, or the flip side to that of the world doesn't owe you anything, I think it's important to balance in that, but you're worthy of it.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think where people struggle is the world doesn't owe me anything and I'm not worthy of it anyway, type of a thing.
Yeah,
so it's like balancing
that's a good
right?
perspective. Yeah, because I think I've always had that, like, hey, you can go get whatever you want, And I don't know if that's because of this, that I've always felt like, hey, if I go do the work, I'm going to get the result. If somebody else can have this great life, why not me?
I almost feel like we already have it all.
Yeah.
But we have to still go get it.
Yeah.
But we already have it all.
So I forget that there are some people out there that are beating themselves up thinking like, oh yeah,
I don't deserve it.
I don't deserve it. Yeah.
And if they have that belief, their behavior is going to match that program, and they will continue to reinforce that, and they will continue to self-sabotage. And that's where we come in and go, okay, we're worthy of it all. How do we know that? Because God has told us that he wants us to have everything that he has. We can have anything we want, everything. Yeah. And we already really do have it. It is a perspective and an awareness. And I love that you keep coming back to that, because I think that is what drives me to do this work. Is I think that is something that, for whatever reason, I am a professional perspective finder.
Yeah.
And it probably plays to my laziness, honestly. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like my path of least resistance of like, what perspective do I need to find to make this work?
Yeah.
But I find that now that I kind of have the formula to it, or like I do it intentionally and not just out of avoidance, like maybe when I did when I was younger, that's why I am so driven to help people to understand themselves so they can find the perspective of acceptance. Because that's really what it comes down to, right? Like, can you accept things, the way that they are, and then move with inspired and divine action towards what you desire?
Yeah.
And so finding that perspective is the linchpin to it all.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite quotes by Wayne Dyer. He says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
That's it.
And just because the world doesn't owe you anything doesn't mean you can't go get everything.
100%.
And that's an important thing, I think, for people to remember. And I guess for some reason, I don't know, I'm just built that way where I just understand, or I just believe that I can go get anything I want. But yeah, I think if somebody's listening to this, it's important for them to remember, just because the world doesn't owe you anything doesn't mean you can't go get everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're literally here to teach us that. That's how you're wired. So that's why it resonates so much. That's why it plays to your strength to operate like that in the world. So I love it when I work with people and they're doing so many things that just feel right, and they feel right because they are right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's awesome.
So I want to ask, maybe change of direction here. How long have we been going? Okay. We've got about an hour. Do we get you guys all good for a little bit more here?
Yeah.
Because I like this stuff. So, maybe you're not a
Everybody didn't know you're so emotional.
Brandon is really just this emotional
powerhouse.
Yeah.
So
he's like, I wasn't until I started working with Altee, and then I got into all sorts of
that
issues.
is true. I do want to say. So I think I told this on one of the previous ones. I started working with you whenever it was 5 years ago, right? And I would say things got worse before they got better. But it was only because I got in my own way because of my conditioning, right? Mm-hmm. And so anytime we want to get better at something, you're going to have to go through some pain or some fear or some sort of
discomfort.
Discomfort. Resistance isn't the right word, but discomfort. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think if it's resistance, it's because we're resisting it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, you go to the weight room and there's resistance lifting weights, but I don't know. You guys get the idea, I think. But what I want you to talk about, if you would, is, you're not a marriage counselor, are you?
No.
Okay, good. I think. Okay. I'd like you to talk about just some dynamics you see with couples. Mm-hmm. Marriages, couples. Blake just mentioned, you really helped his marriage out with learning some of these things, and whether you want to talk about the different types of people we all are, or maybe a little bit of the difference between men being divinely masculine and women being divinely feminine, and why that's so important, and how we're always going to be.
So if you put on a dress, does it make you feminine?
I don't know. You tell me. I've never wore a dress, Jeff.
I don't know, man.
Hey, we're open to different.
But there's
I'm not open to that. No, not at all.
There's relationships where there's men that aren't being masculine, and women that have to end up being more masculine because of that. And you want to kind of delve into that a little bit.
Well, first of all, I would like to. I don't know if apologize is the correct term, but Brandon and Lexi are really my guinea pigs in a lot of things. They let me in. I'm coming in whether I'm invited or not. That's just kind of an arrangement that
I think overall it's a win.
It's mostly beneficial.
In all seriousness, like I say, you're gifted. There's a difference between being talented and gifted. You're both, but you are definitely gifted in this area, and I've seen it. And I've worked with a lot of people over the years. I've done coaching and counseling and all kinds of different stuff. And there's something about the work you do that has been more impactful for me in my life personally than any of the other work out there that other people I've worked with on. And that's in business. So this is, you're on here for a third time for a reason. And so I hope people are really listening to this stuff and trying to understand it. And I know sometimes might seem a little bit like, to me, I use the word hokey, kind of weird. Mm-hmm. But the more you really, for me, the more I've really let it in, I've felt it. I felt that this is truth. This is good stuff. And then if it's not, it doesn't serve me, then I know, Mm-hmm. But you definitely, and people, if they'll meet with you and talk with you, they'll feel it. There's no faking it. So anyway, that just so people kind of know that's.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't want to cry on a podcast. No, I appreciate that, and I think that just the relationship that we had established before any of this anyway just kind of plays into it. Which I love when a good plan comes together, and things just work out. But because you've allowed me to and accepted me as things come to me and allow me to share, it helps me in this work. And so, you've been an integral part of that too, because I've been able to share that. But what I appreciate about you and Lexi is not only have I worked on you individually and your kids, but then as a couple too. So it's okay, now that you know this is your type and this is how you work, okay, and we can look at, like you guys were on your trip to Jackson Hole, and I just, as I'm doing research, I'm like, oh, I'm going to send this and kind of put these things together or whatever. And it just comes to me how it comes to me.
You can totally share
anything,
whatever you want, just because I want people to get this, because
to understand.
I do. Yeah. So I mean, I'm okay with you sharing.
So when I was looking at it, I was like, this is so beneficial for couples, because I was like, okay, so I'm looking at the different things so the way that human design breaks things down, it's like, okay, what's your type, your strategy, your authority, how do you digest? Like, what digestion do you have? What's your environment? That, like, where do you regroup? Where is it? Like, for me, it's mountains, for Brandon and you, it's kitchens, which is interesting. That's an environment, because
you should have been on the elk hunt with us.
I know.
Well,
serious.
Next time.
I need to be in the mountains, and you guys could have fed me, and then we would have collaborated, because we're in our environment, right? Because the kitchen represents sustenance, emotional and physical, and that's where you gather, and that's where you are. That is your environment to kind of regroup and get clear.
Yeah.
For me, it's mountains, and it doesn't have to be necessarily in the mountains, but just a perspective that I can see a broader range, because that's how things come to me, is I can see how the pieces kind of fit together. Right.
The Altee, is that specific to the type, or is that
not necessarily?
Yeah. So someone else could have could be a manifesting generator, but have a different.
Totally.
That's cool. That's super interesting.
Yeah. Cause you're a different type.
He's a generator.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
And so then you've got, just these different things of like, what's your sense? What's your strongest sense? So, let me look at Jeff's. I can't remember, but Brandon's is touch. So in his touch, in his sense of being touched, like being his strongest sense, it's how he interprets the world, really, and really how he shares his gifts too. So like for him, a pat on the back, or like, a hug, or physical intimacy, or whatever might be, that is how he feels connected. That's how he interprets the world. So for Lexi,
need more hugs, dude?
Yeah. Right, actually, he needs to. Yes, he needs to give them and receive them. But that's important for him. And like for Lexi, it's feeling or a vibe. So like, this is how I kind of work with couples, is I'm like, okay, so Lexi and Brandon are both generators. And then I'm like, okay, so Lexi, your authority is sacral, and Brandon's is emotional. So when you guys are coming to a decision, or coming to trying to decide on something, Lexi, ask Brandon, how does that make you feel? Because it's his emotions that are going to confirm it for him. And he's going to say to her, how's that feel in your gut? What does your gut tell you? And that is like, it's kind of like a love language, right? It's like you are honoring how they receive answers. And then in that, it just brings so much clarity, because if Lexi's expecting him to, doesn't that feel right in your gut? It's like, I don't know. I don't get answers like that. I need to fill it out. I need to sleep on it. Actually, like, it's not appropriate for me to make a decision right now.
You know what happens when you sleep on something?
You squish it.
Get squished.
Oh, my dad jokes, you guys.
You
two are full of
down.
No,
we'll do a dad joke episode.
That would be funny.
Dude,
you should.
You
totally should. You totally should. But you can see how when you. Oh, I'm messing with your cord under the table here. I can see it. I can see
I
my
won't make
feet.
any jokes. I will leave that joke.
Okay. All right. I know more.
Stop it, Altee. We're on a podcast.
Oh my
Mess
gosh.
with Jeff's
Listen,
cord.
I'm here with a bunch of dudes.
I'm not sure how they're going to edit this, but it may or may not be cut out.
Your type.
Oh my gosh.
We're not editing.
And Brandon's his touch. Oh my gosh. This could go anywhere at this point. No, but when you start to understand those kinds of things about each other, you can eliminate a lot of chaos. You can eliminate a lot of confusion. You can eliminate a lot of frustration, and really get down to, how do you communicate? How do you interpret the world? How do you learn? How do you love? How do you share? How do you, those kinds of things and then when you understand it about your kids too, then you can meet them where they're at. And there might be, it's not like you can just be like, okay, again, like, oh, this is your type, so this is how we're going to parent you. It's like, listen, you got to fit into this family system somehow. And there's a benefit for you to figure out how to do things that are uncomfortable, but when you know that, like for our projector daughters, it's like they need their downtime.
Yeah.
So when they retreat and they literally want to lay down and rest, Our other kids might be able to keep going and they look lazy, and then they come out and they boss everyone around because they see the efficient ways to do things, Yeah. But when you're like, that's her role. That is her role. And the more I can teach her how to utilize that, because for projectors, their strategy is to wait for an invitation. So they can share their insights when they're invited to do so. If they don't, then people aren't receptive to it.
Right.
And so when you teach them, hey, make sure someone's asked your opinion, or you can say, hey, I have some insight about that. Do you mind if I share? And if they say yes, that's your invitation. Yeah. And when you teach them how to honor themselves in that, they know how to show up as their best version of themselves to share that, instead of going to school and they might have these insights and share it on the playground, and kids are like, don't tell me what to do. And then they come home and feel bad, and they want to retreat, and then they don't want to go to school anymore, and they feel bad about themselves. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Totally.
And so when you start to understand how they, how they operate, like I'll give Lexi a rundown, this kid interprets the world like this, so play to this. And so give them options. Like for Bridger, he's nervous about everything. And so he's got a sacral, response. So it's like, okay, so teach him to trust his gut in it. How does this, is this a yes for you? Is it a no? And so instead of always telling him this is safe or this isn't, he's not gaining his own understanding of his instincts.
Yeah. Then he becomes dependent.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then if you're not there to tell him this is safe or this isn't, how is he going to regulate?
Then he just shuts down. Yeah.
And it really does boil down to emotional regulation, because if you can emotionally regulate, you can keep your heart in control. If your heart's in control, your spirit's running the show rather than your mind or your conditioning or your program.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Awesome.
I mean, I can totally see how, not only as a parent, but, as a marriage that, like Kelcey, I always tell her, I don't know what hers is, but I always just trust her. I'm like, all right, whatever you feel, because it seems like she is so
spot on.
Yeah, all the time. Like she really does a good job of letting her intuition or whatever it is, like, hey, this person's a great person, or hey, this situation, let's do this. Or I said it yesterday. I'm like, see, that's why I always listen to you.
Okay, so I would say this is a prime example of a couple, Jeff and Kelcey. Divine masculine, divine feminine. Because Jeff's living in his divine masculine, Kelcey can do that. Because if you weren't, she couldn't do that. So that's in my opinion.
Yeah, how do you see that?
So in my opinion is she feels completely safe being able to do what she can and needs to do.
Yeah.
Because you're doing what you're supposed to do.
So you're in your divine masculine. So you can regulate your own emotions. You are connected to source, to God. And when you are in that, and listen, we there's a balance of we all have both divine feminine and divine masculine, because everything is a balance or in harmony.
Yeah.
So we've got that because it's in both. We have to do and be. And the masculine is the doing and the feminine is the being. But when we look at partnerships as a role of a marriage and a man or a husband who is in his divine masculine, you are emotionally safe for her to surrender to.
Yeah.
And she can be in her divine feminine, which in turn actually serves the divine masculine. But sometimes when that gets out of balance, we go into ego, and then we want you might want her to serve you in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so when we have that balance and we're aligned that way, and it really comes down to emotional regulation, then you can trust her intuition, and she feels like you are emotionally safe to share that with.
Yeah.
Because you are in your divine masculine.
Wow. Interesting.
And you can tell when you go into ego versus spirit, right? Or your program or your brain versus your heart, because it goes out of balance, and there's disruptions and there's frustrations and there's contention.
Yeah.
So listen to this. This is, I read this. This is a Facebook post from somebody I read yesterday. Goes along with this. It's really good. I think it's really good. A message for men, right? A lot of random messages from men asking what turns me on. This is a woman writing this up, obviously. So I thought I might just put it out there because I think I speak for a lot of women on this, and I'm here to help. Do you want to know what turns me on? What makes me burn for you? What makes us breathless? What awakens every passionate instinct and unwraps every layer of fiery feminine sensuality? And then here's your answer. Go to therapy, do your inner work, heal yourself, lead yourself. Be brave enough to get uncomfortable for the sake of wholeness and depth. Be willing to build your emotional muscle so that your arms are strong enough to hold the fire of an awakened woman. Be open enough to lean into a level of depth you've never experienced. Talk. Be humble enough to admit that you don't know everything. Go deep. Go get real. Stop hiding behind service level sex. Evolve. Confront what you need to confront so you can move forward without the shadow of your past. Stop thinking that vulnerability is weakness. It takes a giant of a wild man to get vulnerable, and it's hot. Stop running from magic when it's exactly what you need. Stop telling yourself she's too much when the reality is you're just afraid to be enough. Lead yourself so you can lead me. Believe that you can handle it. Act accordingly. Be the safe space, the strong ground, the calm in her storm. Do this and you'll find your goddess. Do this and you'll be taken to a place of wholeness and ecstasy you don't know existed and likely wouldn't have found on your own. Do this and you'll be home. And then she says, P.S. sisters, do the same or stop complaining. So thought that was good.
Yeah.
Kind of says it all right
there,
right? Yeah. So I think that's
when
good.
You step into that and it's really stepping into the remembrance of the wholeness that you are. And that's what all these tools really, I feel like, are here for, is to, again, decondition, remove the interference that's been accumulated through society, through our survival, through our conditioning and all of that, to return to the essence and the wholeness that we already are, that we've forgotten.
So do you think that's where someone's self-esteem comes from? Because I believe like a lot of this comes from self-esteem, right? If somebody has a low self-esteem, odds are they're going to act the opposite of what Brandon just read. If somebody has a high self-esteem, odds are they're probably going to perform on a lot of those things. There might be some things that they need to still work on, but it seems to me self-esteem is tied to a lot of this stuff. How do you feel about that?
So I think it's a remembrance of the self-worth that you already are, you know, that you are created as just because. And then as you act in that way, rather than it being a replacement of the lack of the awareness of the wholeness that you are, it enhances it.
Yeah.
So when you get back to that, when we decondition and remember the essence of who you are, that divine masculine or that divine feminine or the balance of both, and then you step into that and you accomplish these things and you create, you know, that's what we're here to do, is to create with our minds and our bodies, our hands, our spirits, it's society and community and all of that. But we've got to get it in order. We've got to remember who we are, the wholeness that we are, and then create from there, instead of creating something to then go, now am I worthy? Now that I've done this, now I feel whole.
Yeah.
We've got to remember that first. And then, when you get it in order, then you, again, it renews us. It invigorates us. We share that instead of having it make up for the lack of, not that we are, because that's not even true. It's a perception, right? And so that lack, and then we don't project that on, I don't feel whole. Now I need you to do this for me so I feel whole. Do you know what I mean? We provide that for ourselves so that we can then turn around and provide that to humanity. And if everyone's responsible for themselves, we don't have to have these. The world, it's so loud out there. Get involved in this, and I almost feel like that is the distraction to take us away from the remembrance of the wholeness that we are. And when we get back to that and do that in that quiet stillness, then we can turn around and build the society.
So how do we do that? How do we continue to return to that center every day? What are some practices that people should be doing to? We get off track, get back on track. Remember who you are. Remember you're already worthy. You know, it's not my will be done. It's God's. It's thy will be done. So, you know, but we have to remember. Like somebody follow your heart. No, I mean, find your truth or God's truth, right? Or universe, whatever you believe, right? Yeah, pray.
Yeah.
Do God's will, and everything works out. Do your will. You may or may not, right? But do God's will. So anyway, what can we do on a day? I mean, obviously pray. I read scriptures,
right?
Meditation. What I mean, what do you?
All those things, and I think a huge part of that is to do this work to, first of all, identify the difference. You know what I mean? We're so, again, I keep using the word conditioned, but to go that a lot of us haven't even realized what it feels like, the difference between alignment and living out of sorts. I mean, and that's why we have a society of so much stress and medication and anxiety and depression, because it is, if you were feeling harmonious, you would not need to medicate to feel different.
Right.
And so I think, doing this work to be able to, first of all, identify the difference of this is when I do this, I feel like I'm in a place of harmony and peace. And so, but to establish that, I mean, I incorporate a lot of things. I start my morning with a meditation, because if I can start in alignment, then I can notice much quicker when I kind of get off track. And I mean, I do it every day, but I just have these tools
How long
of awareness.
do you do it for?
I'll usually do like a 20-minute meditation in the morning. I didn't always, like, even, starting this work.
What would you say to someone that says, I don't
it.
have 20 minutes? What
5,
would you say?
2 minutes.
But would you also say that your priorities might be a little bit off?
I would say if you don't have time, you probably need to do it. You probably need to do it for an hour.
Yeah.
When you talk about alignment, the opposite of alignment, I would say, is chaos. So if somebody doesn't have 20 minutes, their life is in chaos.
Yeah.
And their life is probably in chaos because they're not trying to find something that can bring alignment.
Yes.
And so,
and it's funny how when you start to prioritize that, it's just like, when I look at this work, and it's kind of like when you are tightening things up in fitness or like nutrition, right? It's like for like the carnivore diet, it's like you are eliminating everything but what you're focused on.
Yep.
And so if you're interested in a life of alignment, then you've got to eliminate all that. Yeah. So you can't do that and meditate. It's like something's got to go, if you want to live in alignment, if not, you don't have to.
I mean, to me, it seems simple. It's like just, sit down and design your perfect life and start working towards a daily schedule that leads to that, because someone's life is just a reflection of their priorities, in my opinion. If I look at someone's life, I just go, I know what your priorities are. If you're overweight, I know what your priorities are. It doesn't make it wrong for me, right? I mean, you can have whatever you want out of life, but I can look at somebody's life and know what their priorities are.
It's because your outer world reflects your inner state.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, that's the way I see it, is if somebody really wants to start getting their life in alignment or having more peace, then they've got to start somewhere. I think that's why working with someone like Altee, who can give them this perspective of like, hey, maybe you should change this, or maybe you should ask yourself, do you really believe that? Like, are you really operating within a belief, or do you feel like you're in constant chaos because you're going against your belief? And then really working on, what do you want your dream life to be like, and then start creating daily disciplines and not trying, we talk about eliminating. I think things are hard to eliminate because, it's like a house. You get a new house and you buy a bigger house and you still fill it up with stuff. Yep. You buy a bigger house and you still fill it up with stuff. And you buy a smaller house, it's still filled up with stuff. So what's the answer? You're always going to fill your daily schedule. You're always going to fill something. That's what we do. And so rather than trying to eliminate it, replace it with something that goes into the life that you really desire to live. Would you agree with that?
Totally. So
I think that, to me, that's where if somebody really said, where do I start? I think it's meeting with somebody like Altee that can get them to understand the perspective in which they're operating their lives in.
Exactly, yeah.
And then start designing the life they really want to live, whether it's on paper or whatever. I think paper is a great place to start. And then they can start reverse engineering it by creating daily disciplines that ultimately reflect the life that they really want to live. And then they're going to find joy in the process of creating it. I think, we've all been in a place where in our lives where we didn't have joy in the life we were living. And then we started doing these things that maybe it was uncomfortable, but like people I know in business thought we were crazy, man. We were doing all these things. They go, man, do you ever slow down? And for me, I was having the time of my life. Like, I never looked at it. People, what do you do for fun? I'm like, this is fun to me. Like, I'm having the time of my life. And they couldn't see it, but it's because I saw that everything I was doing was in alignment with the life that I wanted to live. And now looking back on it, like, I wish I would have had the awareness and the understanding to explain that to people who thought I was crazy. Because I would just, I would respond in stupid ways. But now,
That's why you need a coach who can see you're in the frame. You need a coach who can see outside of the frame. That's what like Altee can do, right? Is there's all this clutter. You can't see it when you're in the picture, and she can go, okay, let me help you see yourself from way above
Yeah.
and what matters and what doesn't matter and start.
I was just going to say, like for instance, you talked about replacement. So like when one of the things that I sent Brandon in one of our last sessions was, here's your focus for the week. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm going to kind of remove these things energetically, the emotions that are kind of causing the chaos that have shown up this week. I'll work on that. I'm going to work on the back end for you. And then here's your focus, and I give him something to focus on. And here was a new belief. It was, I surrender myself to life. I surrender myself to my destiny and all that it means to be me. I trust that the timing will be right for me to share who I am and what I have in a meaningful and abundant way. I know that I'm always supported, and I relax and trust in my support. Yeah. Because he was, it's sometimes we get like, I've got to do these things. And it's like, just actually, you probably need to do less. Yeah. And then let me take those things and reroute your perspective. You just focus on this. And as you do this, here's the thing about this work that I just love. It's hard to identify like, oh, well, this changed out this or whatever, but it's as things start to change, you start to notice the effect that this focus has in every area of your life, because again, your outer world reflects your inner state. So you start organizing from the inside out, and your external world starts to reflect that order that you are commanding, and you are doing that in a state of alignment with your heart and your brain working together from that, with that intuition and your ability to come up with new ideas. So we're the brain is working for us instead of against us. Instead of the conditioned programming, we're tapping into a different part of it that's creating, but we've got to get the heart open first. That's what's connected to God. Get that signal to the brain to create and move the body.
That outward image.
Can you explain? Because I know people are wondering, because you just said, I'll take those emotions and get rid of those emotions. How the crap does that work? Like, they're my emotions that are trapped in my body. We're going to have a session. We're going to talk. You're going to say, okay, you've got whatever it is. You've got despair because this happened here, or you've got whatever it is, and we're going to get rid of those. Can you explain how that works or no? Is that something how does that work?
Well, it's really interesting until you experience it. You may not even believe it yourself, And
by the way, sorry, I don't mean to cut you out, but as you're answering this, because I want to know, well, can't we just do that on our own? And I think we can, right?
Yeah,
we
totally.
So talk about all that, because I think
totally can.
You don't.
But here's the thing: again, the subconscious.
And you're not the healer. Christ is the healer.
Christ is the healer.
I want to make sure people understand.
Yes.
We are very.
Yes.
We're not. Altee is not some healer. She's not. She would never say that. So I just think it's.
No, I'm a facilitator, and I have these tools that I've learned that seem to work. You know, and so what I'll use muscle testing. So here's the thing: we are designed for survival. Yeah. And so it's like the whole theory, like you can't bite off your own finger, right? And so sometimes you need you can try, but you're going to step in and protect yourself from that. You know what I mean? So like for you to find the issues that you intentionally buried because they were painful, it's hard to do. It can be done. But when you have someone else going, hey, I can see this because I'm looking at it from a different perspective. Listen, and then I have the tools where I can muscle test because we're all energetically connected. And so we're bypassing the conscious mind and tapping into the subconscious. It's literally like hooking up a diagnostic tool to your engine of your vehicle. So you've got a check engine light. How do we know? Your elbow hurts. That's your check engine light, right? Yeah. And so there is a problem in the system, right? And so so I would use muscle testing to find out maybe there's an emotion, there's probably an emotion, a belief, whatever that is trapped in the body that when you experience something in life, you couldn't reconcile it or make sense of it. And you had to either keep moving or maybe it was too intense to deal with in the moment. And the signal to the brain was chaotic. So it shut off the part of your brain that comes up with a solution. That's the creativity. But in survival, that is not a time to use that part of your brain. So that part shuts off and the signal is chaotic. So it forces that energy into the body. That's where the body memory comes from. That's why there's people that write books, The Body Keeps the Score, because that is body memory that is stored. It is energy that is stored in the body that is causing distortion, which is dis-ease or imbalance.
Wasn't it kind of like, if someone had a stressful day, like, I need a back rub, or my shoulders hurt, or, that's where they're storing energy, or they get knots or something like that, right? Isn't that the same thing?
Yeah, because if you're seeing that this experience was a burden, then you're going to start to feel it. And emotions are vibrational frequency. Low frequency causes density. And when that's trapped in the body, it causes heaviness.
Yeah.
That's physics. And this is why emotions drive our physiology, because depending on the emotion that you experience or the vibrational frequency, you're going to have an effect.
Well, it's like, it reminds me of someone saying like that they don't believe in this stuff, because that's how I was at the beginning. I'm like, yeah, right. But then also, it's like if you're at the grocery store and the guy in front of you is not looking at you, but he had a bad day and he's just in that mood, you're like, don't piss that guy off today. You can feel
You're feeling it.
You never need to see his face. Right. You never need to see. You can just feel.
He doesn't have to say anything.
Yeah, just be nice to that guy right now. That's
you might move. You might find yourself moving away from him because it's like you're picking up on something, you know. But when you carry that information in the body and you have stored that there, it is hard for us to find that on ourselves. I have, people that work on me, because even with me doing this, there's still stuff that I'll probably hide from myself because I don't want to deal with it or face it or whatever. That makes a lot of sense,
because I've never heard you explain it that way. This is making a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah. So I just have these diagnostic tools, if you will, that I can locate what emotion this is and where is it stored in the body. And then really it's released with intention. So it's almost like, when you pray for someone, how does that work? People can feel that energy transfer, right? When someone prays for you, if you, in church, if someone's fasting for you, if the ward is fasting for you and you have that strength in numbers and that spiritual, energetic transfer, you feel it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so for whatever reason, having these tools and my belief that it's like, oh, well, there's that despair that's lodged in your liver that's upsetting you. By bringing it to the conscious awareness, it's almost like it's like giving you permission to release it. It's like now you've understood like what that meant and it can be let go of, because it doesn't need to be stored in your body anymore to keep you safe.
Yeah. And the person you're working on doesn't even need to know what it is, right? As long as you can tell, and you can still, because of that energetic connection.
Well, it'd be similar to like, if you're getting a massage and, they say, they find a knot and they say, hey, breathe and relax. And then you leave and the knot's gone,
you're like, how did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you had it because of an emotion, really. Probably you were stressed out or something and you left and you felt great, And if you have the same emotion, it's going to come back because you hold those emotions in the same spot. So whether it's your liver or your back or your head or people that get headaches all the time, isn't this kind of...
Yeah. And it really, I mean, in to put it in terms of, exactly. And it's like, I have these tools that seem to work, that seem to be extremely accurate on identifying these things. And I really do think it does come down to perspective. And my, as we talk and discuss some of these things that are going on, it's almost like your spirit is like, I feel safe to let this go because it doesn't need to serve its purpose anymore. I've learned the lesson. If we learn the lesson, we get to move on from the experience. And so it really is, I'm kind of essentially offering a prayer on your behalf, really, because it's like, I am just kind of that conduit. Again, I'm a facilitator, not a healer. Yeah. But it just seems to.
I wonder how much it affects like what we eat, our perception of what we eat. If it's good, if we think it's good for us, it's good for us. If we don't think if we think it's bad for us, I wonder how much.
There's a lot of science behind that.
Yes.
Actually.
It's almost as if you could eat a donut and really believe it's going to be good for you to eat that donut, and it actually could be somewhat nutritious, almost, right?
Better for you,
it's
for sure.
It's crazy to think about that.
It's a perception, absolutely, and they have done studies on that, and Dr. Bruce Lipton did a lot of studies on that. He was working at Stanford Medical School and studying cellular biology, like physical biology. And just how cells behave. And he's like, there's more to this than just how our physical bodies, behave. And it's because it goes to perception rather than what's actually happening. And the reason why they know that is because they would study these, groups, these like radical religious groups that were ingesting strychnine poison at lethal doses, but they weren't dying. And then you have people who do a plant-based diet that should be super healthy, but it's actually fear-based, and the chemicals of fear are more toxic than the strychnine poisoning that they were ingesting. So it's like, well, then what's the difference? And the difference is perception.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what like placebo effect comes from.
Exactly.
Sure. I mean, I think if someone wants to research what they call the God particle, you can research that and exactly what you're talking. I don't know if you've ever done any research on it. It's really interesting if you just go to Google and you research the God particle, because this is the subject that they can't quite figure out why it responds this way. So they call it the God particle.
Yeah, because you got to have two people eating the exact same diets, and one be super fit and one be super sick, right? It's possible depending on maybe how they look at food or look at
their beliefs, their emotions.
I know people that don't have the best. I wouldn't consider the best diets, and they're super fit. You know? And they
so if I believe hard enough, I can go eat some donuts and
Hey, really, just work on your belief, Blake. That's all. That's what I'm here to. That's what I keep trying to tell you.
Well, like Kevin, your husband, he can eat half a dozen donuts and go straight to muscle.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Because he believes it. Yeah.
No, really. I'm not even joking.
It's
I do that
true.
with cigars. I'm like, this is good for me. Because I heard Andrew Huberman talk about it.
That's funny.
Well, it might be because it might be providing the peace and clarity that you haven't been able to get somewhere else. So someone else might, be super affected by, the tobacco of it or whatever. But because it puts you in a place of peace, that actually can have a more positive effect physiologically.
Reduction in stress. Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So cool.
Awesome. What a great episode today,
man.
This is
good.
This is a good one.
Anything else we're missing? Or we could talk all day.
Is she coming back for a fourth one?
There's probably a chance. We'll see. We'll see what our listeners say. We'll see what they say. We'll see what the reviews are. We had Hector Lamarck on last week, so he better watch out after this one. This is a good one.
Yeah,
really good.
That's good.
It was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, you guys.
Number 3. Thank you.